Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marble Snap video, taking a look at some decks for all the different pools for the new location that is dropping tonight, and that is Collapsed Mine. So what this one does is when it reveals itself, it is going to fill both sides with rocks, and then either player can skip doing anything on one of their turns in order to delete their rocks. Worth noting, you only delete your rocks by skipping a turn, so it'll kind of be some mind games there, whether people decide to actually take the turn off to make the rocks go away, or if they decide to make use of them. So looking at the first deck we have here for Pool 1, we have a Kazar Zoo deck, pretty standard stuff for the early pools. But obviously it makes pretty good use of the rocks without having to actually waste a turn to get rid of them, since we just buff up our rocks, and we can do that again with Blue Marvel. These are really the two major buffs you'll be having access to at Pool 1, but they should do a pretty good job. The Zoo deck, pretty known for being one of the better Pool 1 decks, and just a lot of generic good cards here for that tempo Zoo style. Chavez to help give us a bit more consistency in getting the cards that we want. Things start to get a bit more interesting in Pool 2, however. Moving on to Pool number 2 here. First, we have an upgrade to our Zoo deck. The core of this deck stays very similar, as a lot of the good cards are still good, but there are a few new additions which are definitely worth adding to the Zoo deck once you make it into Pool 2. Sunspot obviously has some great synergy, because if we want to get rid of our rocks, this actually gives us an upside for passing a turn. And then Iceman is the other one drop that is really, really good that you get in Pool 2. You could consider Korg as well, but I think I like Iceman a bit more for this style of deck. And then we just add Scorpion, because he's one of the better 2-drops in the game right now. 2 power plus however much power you are minusing from your opponent. A lot of times this card ends up being a lizard worth of stats without the downside, so really good 2-drop, definitely I think makes the cut in here. Rest of the deck pretty much the same, just general Zoo good stuff, with some ways to buff up our rocks if we want to keep those around. Then for our second Pool 2 deck here, we have one that doesn't lean into the location as much as it tries to kind of mess with other decks that are leaning into the location. So this is a pretty standard Pool 2 Dino, but we just have a bit of a destroy package. So we have Nova, Bucky, Carnage, and probably most importantly here, Killmonger. The idea with this is, you know, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people trying decks like we showcased, the Zoo style stuff. We're trying to leverage having all of these rocks, and Killmonger just says, screw your rocks. No rocks for you or me. So I think that'll be kind of useful. And then we have the light destroy package. Other than that, pretty standard Dino stuff, just some good cards to keep our hand full. Moon Girl can obviously combo with the Dino to get 2 of them. Chavez gives us that draw consistency, and Shang-Chi has proven to be one of the better tech cards in the game right now. So overall, very solid Pool 2 list if you want to kind of try and mess with decks that are leaning into the location rather than lean into it yourself. Moving on to Pool 3 here, we're going to start off with Deathwave Disruption. Pretty standard list. One small little change here is I opted to put in Magneto over Leader. I think generally Leader has been the better pick in the past, but recently I've been finding myself going up against a lot of Zabu Surfer stuff, so the Magneto pull has actually been quite a bit more useful for me than the normal Leader stuff. And I've been finding a lot of board states where Leader is a little bit awkward. So I made that switch, kind of a meta call if you want to put in Magneto or Leader, but both serve as good top end. But this deck pretty much trying to take advantage of the extra rocks on the board to make our death cheaper, faster. So that's all good. Other than that, pretty stock list, just your cheap stuff that you're going to destroy, your destroy payoffs, death, Wave to kind of lock them out a little bit, though Wave did get a bit worse at doing that with Zabu being around now. Arrow has been really clutch, and I think she'll be good with this location, especially if you just completely blank a lane and you're winning the other 2, which probably isn't that hard to do if the opponent waits to get rid of their rocks till later on in the game. You can just yoink them over there with Arrow, and then obviously She-Hulk for the wave into She-Hulk Death and another play stuff. Just still a really solid deck, and I think it's going to leverage the location pretty well, especially decks that are trying to make use of the rocks, because we'll just blow them up with Killmonger. Looking at a deck that might try and make use of its rocks rather than get rid of them, Patriot makes a lot of sense for this one. Probably the most sensible thing to be buffing your stuff outside of generic buffs across all one cost or across everything with Ka-Zar or Blue Marvel. Obviously, we do have those in this list too, because they're just generally good in Patriot. But Patriot's going to give our rocks even more power. Pretty standard stuff here for the Patriot. I really like this list in the past. Onslaught is definitely kind of an optional one, but I have liked him to help close out games where we do not get our Ultron. And Ultron won't even be quite as valuable if our rocks are taking up a whole lane. Ultron's not going to be gaining as much value, so I think Onslaught will be a bit better. Magic helps us stay in the game a little bit longer to get the cards we need to close it out and can get rid of a bad location. Cosmo's kind of the tech card inclusion for this one to counter other decks, because we don't have a ton of on-reveal stuff aside from basically Mystique and Ultron. We pretty much get under the Cosmo, and it can protect us from other things, so that's pretty nice. Normally Debris is in this slot, but I think Debris doesn't really get very much value when rocks are already going to be on the field a lot of the time. So Patriot definitely seems like a really solid choice if you want to go for a more benefiting from the rocks angle. Another direction you could go in Pool 3 is the classic Sarah Control deck. This is one that doesn't see quite as much play as it used to, but I have seen a few posts of people getting infinite with it this month, and I think it definitely can do pretty decent with this location, since opponents are usually going to be funneled to a lane or two, and we have just pretty much all the good disruption cards we could ask for this type of stuff. Killmonger, obviously, to blow up the rocks, Shang-Chi to blow up the big stuff, and Enchantress to shut off the powerful ongoing effects. And these cards get a lot more appealing when you're playing them for one less mana on the final turn to kind of swing the game around. Other than that, pretty regular list here. Scarlet Witch is definitely a card I've seen a lot of people dropping, but sometimes this can totally turn around a game by swapping a location at the last minute, or just getting rid of one that really hinders your game plan. Mysterio, there's a little bit less guessing here, but with the rocks, but if you play Mysterio before the rocks reveal, it's not really much of a problem. And I think it's still worth it, especially for the mind games and the Bishop payoff. But really good list, honestly. I think, you know, is it the tier 1 deck that it used to be? I'm not so sure, but it's definitely more than solid enough to get some wins, and I think this location is a fine one for it. Next up is my Sunhawk deck. This is a deck that utilizes Zabu with a bunch of other powerful 4-drops, and we also have Sunspot and She-Hulk in here. This is the one that ended up taking me to Infinite this month, and I feel pretty confident that this deck is in a really solid place right now. Zabu enables some truly busted stuff, especially when you're able to double up on some of your powerful 4-drops with Moon Girl, especially at a reduced cost, whether that's double Spider-Man, double Shang-Chi, getting a bunch of rocks, Darkhawks, Shuris, etc. It's just really, really good. We also have the Sunspot plan here, where the kind of ultimate high roll with this deck is you pass turn 5 after Moon Girling, you pump up your Sunspot, then you can play double She-Hulk as well as 2 4-drops, usually Darkhawk being the most impactful ones. This one is a little bit higher on the budget side as it is using Darkhawk, but Shuri and She-Hulk will be moving down in the pools in about a week or so, so that should make the deck a little bit more accessible then. But if there is Pool 5, you're trying to figure out what to save up for, I would highly recommend Darkhawk. This card is really ridiculous with Zabu. But definitely really strong deck, and one I think will leverage this location pretty well. And the last deck we're going to take a look at here is another Zabu deck, but this one's a bit more on the budget-friendly side. This is one that Dara took to Infinite on his free-to-play account, and it is a very accessible list. Actually, the only Pool 3 card here is Crossbones, who is by no means core. I think it's a decent card if you have access to it, but this is kind of just the bare bones version of Zabu with Dinosaur. You know, you have some good tech cards, White Queen and Moon Girl both have been really exceptional in most of these Zabu lists, and so you can just upgrade it with pool 3 cards that are good 4-drops as you get them over time. Crossbones is a decent one to use if you have it, and then the rest we just have good 1-drops in Iceman and Sunspot, Scorpion and Lizard as the 2s, Zabu and Cosmo for a little bit of Zabu enabling, and then Cosmo for tech protection. But yeah, definitely a solid way to go with the deck if you want something that's a bit more budget friendly to make use of Zabu. But yeah, those are all our decks for the new location that should be live now. Collapsed Mine. I think it's an interesting one. We've gotten a lot of ones that have been very favorable to death and destroy stuff, and this one definitely falls in there a little bit, but not quite as much as some of the other ones. So I'm interested to see how some of these decks perform, especially the Patriot lists. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you have any ideas about decks you think might do well with the new location, let me know in the comments below. That's going to wrap it up for this one. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.